Hi, this is your host Abdul Bhartia and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. And today we have with us once again Wayne Seguin, Chief Technology Officer at Stark. And Wayne, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Swapnil. It's great to be back.
Today we are going to talk about some of the mega trends that we are seeing in both Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes space. Wayne, what kind of changes and trends have you seen in the Cloud Foundry space in the last couple of years? What kind of concerns are there for organizations who have invested heavily in Cloud Foundry?
Actually, I think your question summarizes it extremely well. A lot of customers, they want to stay with the benefits of the Cloud Foundry developer experience for their developers, but at the same time capitalize on the standardization of technologies around Kubernetes and as far as their futures are concerned. And as such, there's been a few what I would call false starts, showing promise, but archived now. So one of them was the kubecf project that was trying to get Cloud Foundry ported over to running on top of Kubernetes natively. And there was another one, CF Orcates was the other one. So CF Orcates, and again, that one has been archived. And then there's a newer version of, hey, let's take Cloud Foundry and get it running on top of Kubernetes, and that is CF Oncates. And all these efforts have a pretty neat idea. However, they haven't materialized into something that's, let's say, production usable, because clients of ours, at least, have tens of thousands of applications running on their Cloud Foundries, and that doesn't exactly port well over to running on top of Kubernetes directly. So there has to be some sort of a mapping. You're introducing more systems, more clusters, more this, more that, and there's also not a trivial, easy way to kind of map it today as it stands. That said, I've been following a project from Google called Google KF, and they are trying to achieve the same thing, yet their approach is not, let's take Cloud Foundry's bits and pieces and make them run on Kubernetes so that we can kind of switch over, but rather, let's preserve the developer experience and APIs of Cloud Foundry as our core tenant, and enable workloads that were deployed to Cloud Foundry to be simply deployed over to using KF tool. It's basically you substitute these, instead of using CF push, you'll be doing KF push, or you can alias it and still CF push, but in the back end it's the KF. And what KF does is it's several bits. It's a CLI. And then it's several bits on top of Kubernetes that basically handle the behind the scenes things that need to happen in order to take, here is my source code, run it for me. I don't care how, right? That's the premise of Cloud Foundry. Well, KF delivers on that. And at the end of the day, the same CF push, or KF push in this case, that happens ends up with running application code on Kubernetes as the orchestration instead of Diego in the Cloud Foundry world. And they've actually delivered on that. About a year ago is pretty rough shape, not going to lie. But this year, especially the second half of this year, we started kicking the tires of it again, and for real. And it's come quite a long ways, and it's definitely a viable path for companies looking to migrate as many workloads as they can from the Diego-based orchestration to a Kubernetes-based orchestration, so that the developers and operators can use kubectl or use the KF CLI for interacting with application workloads, but it gets them onto that Kubernetes future that they're looking for. And even so, that could be just go ahead and own and operate it like that, or that could be as a stepping stone to then migrate to whatever future they're looking at in the long term. So there's a number of good things happening over there, and I feel very strongly at this point it's worthwhile taking a good look at. It is one of the most promising and viable options for those looking to migrate their workloads onto Kubernetes, in my opinion. And similarly, I have to say, it's not just for running on Google. like Google Cloud, right? It can be actually used to deploy to Amazon and Azure and all actually several public clouds, I think, and also on-prem and with both vSphere and one that excites me is on-prem bare metal. So they have all kinds of options for that via their Anthos system. So you basically just deploy Anthos wherever you want, and then you can just migrate your Cloud Foundry workloads with KF directly on top of it. So it's a really compelling story, to be honest.
Thanks for explaining that in such detail. You mentioned a couple of products that did not succeed, whereas Google KF succeeded. What lessons are there for the community to learn from the failure of such projects and success of Google KF so that as they do work on migration, these lessons will help them?
I think the biggest lesson to be learned is you don't have to always assume you need to take what is existing and transform it to where you want to be, but rather sometimes it's actually very good to step back, say, hey, what is it that we do want to preserve? What is the actual APIs or experience? What is the contract with our end users that they love about us that we want to preserve going forward? And how can we fulfill that in this most straightforward manner by leveraging as many of the target platform native things, in this case Kubernetes, that we can? And I think that's, you don't always see that happen. And so watching that evolve and seeing exactly what happened is pretty interesting. So that was a lesson from that I take away from that, anyways. Because all those other archive projects went on the premise, okay, we've got all these bits. Let's now make these bits run over there. Versus, let's take the actual use cases and stories that this provides and move that experience over there specifically. So
When Stock and Rain helps customers in migrating from Cloud Foundry to Google Cave, what are the challenges that you often see, both culturally and technologically?
So the biggest challenges actually occur at what I would call the edges, right? Like, so when if somebody has just leveraged Cloud Foundry for what Cloud Foundry is and not tried to extend it or do highly unusual things, if they stick to the best practices of here's how you use it, here's how you run your apps and stuff like that, it tends to just work out of the box and is a super effective and efficient migration from Cloud Foundry to on top of KF. So those edge cases where they're having like, modifying the Cloud Foundry platform to do different things underneath that it wasn't meant for, or it's a little awkward to do that. And instead of consuming application workload communications via the routing in, sometimes folks will, go around behind the scenes and reach in underneath. Instead of going through the official routing path, they'll go underneath, start communicating with apps behind the scenes and things like that. That stuff is not necessarily a good fit for this, but what you find is like 80 to 90% of the workloads for most customers probably are a good fit for being able to migrate over to this pretty straightforwardly, and then there's a bit of a lift for an effort, let's say, for the remainder.
Now, if I ask you if there are any steps or, if there is a right way of doing things that you would recommend to folks who are doing these migrations, because they have to avoid mistakes that, most people tend to make in the process.
I mean, the first thing is to obviously, or maybe not obviously, but the first thing is to identify where those edge cases might be, and come up with a plan for how you're going to mitigate them. And the KF tool actually has a facility for helping out with this. And fans of Excel will love this, but basically the KF CLI has a built-in command where you can have it scan a cluster, it calls it scan cluster, but it's basically going to the CAPI for a Cloud Foundry, and it's going to query the Cloud Foundry and pull back a whole bunch of data and information and dump it into an Excel file. And then it also adds annotations to that Excel file, indicating places that you might want to look for that might be concerned, that might need a plan. And so that's a really good approach, actually.
Can you also talk about what does the timeline look like? How long does it take for such migrations? And it would be great if you can also share how Stock and Vein is helping customers to kind of speed up their journey.
So as far as the migration journey, the timeline depends on which category they're in. If they're in the, hey, we're doing all the right things the right ways, then the timeline for migration is actually a lot shorter, because it's literally just, okay, we're going to redeploy over here, switch over, and holy mackerel, that was cool, right? So it's more of a hold the beer, watch this moment, versus a let's roll up the sleeves and dig into this. So what Carrick and Stark and Wayne are focusing on doing is we've basically built a program around their tooling to work with them and their customers, Google KF and Google, right? To basically, we have a way of assessing their workloads. Basically, all that data that I was talking about earlier, we have a way of basically getting a single pane of glass visualization of the state of their system. And then we have multiple views within that pane of glass for trying to identify what's the low-hanging fruit, what's the mid-range, what's the hard problems, and trying to sort and categorize, and things to assist, like prioritizing which application workloads should go when, and yeah, so we have a systematic way of approaching that that we built a program around, and that's how we approach helping that one, anyways. And yeah, try to work very closely with both Google and the customers to find the best path for the outcome they're trying to achieve. But it also usually, but also usually we start with a small MVP where we're like, well, let's show that it can work in your environment, because let's be real, everybody's environment is very unique because of their particular industry and regulations and choices over time and things like that. So we usually start with an MVP, show that it can run, and we can port some subset sample of applications over, and then after MVPing it, we then can say, hey, let's go do the rest of them.
If you look at the evolution of Stark and Vein itself, you folks started as consultation, but are you also building some tools and platforms to help users?
Yeah, so we build fundamentally have over the last 8 years, what we focused on is specializing in building out tools that help with all of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that you have to do around owning and operating platforms, such that they can be owned and operated and maintained long term effectively. Coming into this new world where folks are looking at trying to migrate from Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes, one of the things that we often find is, well, that's cool and all, but like, how do we look at all of these application workloads and the build packs and the services and there's just all these different concepts that we have to consider when we're going to think about migrating to Kubernetes. And as such, as I mentioned earlier, we've been working on this single pane of glass sort of project for helping to look at, understand, and visualize the state of the system, everything from the pipelines, the operations things, and then obviously what's running on the platforms themselves, from the applications, the application instances, the services, the build packs, the stacks, stem cells, all of the things, right? So it's pretty important to have a clue of what you have today if you're going to make a plan for where you want to be, or how to get to where you want to be tomorrow. And that is exactly what we're trying to solve for. And I think we're coming pretty far along on that. And so if I had to say some special sauce, then we've got a little bit of special sauce in that sort of single pane of glass assessment style approach for identifying Cloud Foundry workloads and helping to prioritize. And that's basically what we're really trying to solve for pretty hard right now.
We have covered this topic earlier, but I want to hammer that point across again, which is, should Cloud Foundry users panic or worry about with all these changes that are happening around in the community and ecosystem?
That's actually a fantastic question. There is a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt flying around these days on the future of Cloud Foundry and all those things. And I would say, don't worry about it. There is like Stark and Wayne, and we're sponsored or powered by the Carrick Group. We're going to be around long term to offer basically enterprise support for owning and operating Cloud Foundry. So it's not going anywhere. You got a solid 3 to 5 years, I'd say, if not longer, on that. So there shouldn't be a sense of urgency. Everything should be approached with a what is the best future for us and our company type of mindset. And as such, slow down, survey the landscape, and let's place some good bets on the future and figure out what's going to look instead of what's new and shiny and up and coming. Let's look at what's going to serve the company, the client companies, much better for the longer run.
Wayne, thank you so much for taking time out today and share these insights. And as usual, I look forward to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It was awesome to be here again. Good to see you.